I think what was so hard as I, ramped up in this role is there's no playbook. If you were to go start a sales team, there's a playbook for what, sales strategy in a team looks like. Same thing with marketing and CS. There's really not a lot out there for RevOps because it's very new and it's very cutting edge. So because I didn't have a playbook to rely on, I kind of took a step back and focused on, some first principles. And that's really what I used as guardrails to create this RevOps playbook within HubSpot.
Welcome to RevOps Champions, a podcast designed for revenue professionals looking to advance sales and marketing initiatives through the role of RevOps within their organizations. In each episode, we feature leaders who are leveraging technology to drive operational efficiency, revenue, and improve the customer experience. Listen in and learn how to become a better RevOps leader within your own organization. Let's get started.
Allison, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of RevOps Champions. I'm particularly excited because all of my guests have been awesome, and you're my first guest on the show with an actual RevOps title. And you're also the owner of that role at HubSpot. As the function of RevOps becomes real and roles are rolled out and functions are rolled out, our viewers and listeners here today are going to learn a lot from you and can learn a lot by following you and HubSpot and how you're using the RevOps model. I believe, therefore, this is a front row seat to how to use RevOps as a competitive advantage as we get further into the age of the customer. Can you start by telling us who HubSpot is, and then when and how you ended up at HubSpot?
Of course. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Brendon. I'm super excited to be here with you today. And no pressure that I'm the first one who has a RevOps title. I'll try to do my best here. So I'm Alison Elworthy, and I'm currently the EVP of RevOps here at HubSpot. And we're a leading CRM platform that provides software and support to help millions of companies grow better. And we kicked RevOps off here at HubSpot in January of this year, 2021. So I'm just under a year in the new role, learning a lot. We're trying to figure it out as we go, and excited to chat today.
Awesome. Well, I'd say already a year, if you think about it that way,
It's true.
Because a year right now is seems like a really long time in many ways because of how technology has impacted us all, right?
Absolutely.
So, Allison, can you tell us what your path was to your current role?
Sure. So I've been at HubSpot for over 10 years, and ops has always been a major part of my career here. I started working in marketing operations, then moved to sales ops, was in a general ops role, and then moved over to lead all of our customer-facing teams. So everything post-sale, I did that for about 4 years. And last year came back into operations. So it's really been great to kind of get the frontline experience, a lot of experience working with our customers, pairing that with my ops experience at HubSpot to help form RevOps. And so it's been great to kind of take what I know in terms of what it's like to be an operator and use that to help empower our teams and set a new strategy for RevOps at HubSpot.
Great. And of course, there are a lot of people, listening today that might be thinking about ops very differently to your experience. And I think that already can be very insightful. So with that, let's take a quick step back to set the scene. In your own words, how do you define RevOps?
Yeah, so we have a nice clean definition here at HubSpot. So I define RevOps as the processes, the systems, and the people that control how your business generates revenue. And then from there, to add on, it's really, the mindset, the practice, the manifestation of unifying all your internal ops teams to then optimize for RevOps and create that right internal foundation that will create the best customer experience.
Right, yeah, and of course, and that's, I think, one of the surprising, talking about customer experience is always, it's almost seen as one of the hidden benefits of a revenue team, where really the way that RevOps is different is because you're putting the customer at the center. That's why, again, as I was saying at the beginning, in the age of the customer, this is why RevOps is something that teams should seriously consider as a competitive advantage, because customer experience is, in fact, one of the major benefits of adopting a RevOps model, correct?
Yeah, I truly believe too the way in which you operate and are organized internally is going to reflect on that customer experience. So RevOps is really the glue that holds together your go-to-market teams, solves for the customer end to end, because it's all about your systems and your processes and your data. All of that needs to be from a customer in versus what we call a function out perspective. And so that's what's really going to drive it. And that's how, it's funny, being in ops, you always think you're solving for, the frontline rep. And that's not the case. You're solving for the customer through the frontline rep. So I think that's just an important distinction. So it really starts within RevOps.
Right. And then just as a quick side note around the operations piece, because what RevOps, of course, has come about from taking marketing ops, sales ops, and customer service ops, and really brought them as into one team. So just for those of us who are less familiar with ops in sort of supporting those three traditional teams, how do you define the sort of, let's say, the three things that the ops team, whether it's the sort of the legacy marketing, sales, and customer service ops, or now this new model of RevOps, what do you think are the three main sort of functions or roles of that RevOps team?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're in the process of defining this playbook at HubSpot, but where I've landed and where HubSpot has landed is the first piece are foundations. You want to make sure all your teams are working off a single crafted foundation. And I think the elements of foundation are threefold. First, it's systems. You all want to be working out of the same system because you're going to get one consistent view of the customer. So you want to make sure your teams have one single system, and that's a foundational element. The second is data. I think we've experienced this at HubSpot as we've kind of grown in these siloed organizations. We all have slightly different definitions, all slightly different sources of data, different data assets and models, and that causes a lot of confusion in the organization. And so you need to have a single foundation of data, a single data model, a single set of KPIs or definitions to define how your teams are doing. That's the second piece of the foundation. The third piece of the foundation is creating a consistent, what I call a people strategy. I think one of the things that I noticed when we pulled all these teams together was that people had different, competencies, levels, career paths, et cetera. And as one unified RevOps team, you need to create a consistent people strategy. So that's the first, what I call the pillar of RevOps, is a single foundation. And so we define it as systems, data, and people. The next element of RevOps is still having that, functional support. You still want to be a great business partner to marketing, to sales, to customer success. And to do that, you need to have subject matter and domain expertise to be really great partners, to drive insights and strategy to help accelerate those teams and be great partners. So I call that the functional fuel of RevOps, right? You're still there to be great business partners and still want to have, I think about RevOps as the horizontal and vertical. The foundations is very horizontal. The functional support is still very horizontal, and I think it's important that you maintain that balance. And then the last piece of RevOps, the third piece, is what I call like that horizontal reinforcement or the horizontal kind of customer view. And there are certain teams that can solve from a customer in versus function out and really want to lead. And I think strategy is one of them. So having a go-to-market strategy that is customer in versus function out and holistic. And another one is enablement. We have teams that used to enable our CS reps and our sales reps, and it was inconsistent. And I think if you want to create a really great end-to-end consistent customer experience, you need to enable your teams in a consistent way. So the three kind of pillars of RevOps, again, are single foundation, the functional fuel, and then the horizontal alignment or horizontal, customer experience that you're creating across your go-to-market teams.
That's awesome. Great. Thank you. And then, because of course we hear a lot and talk a lot about the importance, for example, of a single source of truth. And I guess, all the things that you just talked about really speak to that. Again, with the data is coming from marketing, sales, or customer success, it's all, again, flowing into and visible one place. You can then draw your insights, no matter who you are on the team. You can draw the data, again, from that single source, and it's more likely to be accurate and consistent. So, I love those three pillars. Thank you. So the next thing is, knowing that HubSpot developed a revenue operations team at the beginning of this year, I'm curious, Were there any specific challenges the business was facing that led to the development of RevOps?
Yeah, great question. There were a few actually, so happy to share those. And I think a lot of companies face them today. So the first is just this heightened buyer expectation. The buyer's journey has become increasingly more complex. Buyers have more access to information than they've ever had before. And customers now expect a certain type of buying experience, and one that is more kind of B2C versus just B2B. And so they want a frictionless buying experience. So that was the first reason. We really needed to double down on what that end-to-end go-to-market buying experience was going to be for our customers in order for us to stay relevant and to compete. Additionally, I think, this is not a new thing for HubSpot because we've always been a SaaS model, but I think a lot of companies are starting to shift to a SaaS model. SaaS is growing faster than ever before. I think there are over 10,000 SaaS companies out there bringing to light this new type of revenue model that's more and more complex. And I think, why RevOps is so relevant at this day and age is that there's so many drivers of revenue. And so it's really important to understand kind of the broader revenue model for how your company makes money, what the drivers are, and getting insights ahead of something going wrong. So it's really important to create that predictable revenue model, which RevOps, of course, is responsible for. And then, back to the buyer's journey, but it's not just we're trying to create a great buyer's experience. It's becoming more and more complex. There are so many ways in which a customer can now interact with you. Right? You can talk to a seller on your sales team. You can interact touchlessly with, a free trial or freemium products. So there are many different ways now through humans and technology that your buyers and customers can interact with your business. And it's important to understand how all of those levers interact and play a role into that both buying and customer experience. Again, another reason why RevOps team can really help and look at that holistic view.
Yeah, we might get into this a little bit later, but because you mentioned, the 10,000 SaaS companies, but you also hear a lot more. Brian Halligan talks about the fact that, other industries, so businesses who don't consider themselves SaaS companies, should potentially be considering the RevOps model. But we can maybe come back to that a little bit later if we have time. So, how does RevOps address these evolving trends and solve for them?
Yeah, I think there's three ways in which we solve for some of these trends. And so the ones that we talk a lot about internally at HubSpot are, solving for the customer experience, which we mentioned, solving for alignment, which is so important, and then solving for efficiency. So if we're to start with the customer experience, I think what's great about RevOps, and we talked about this before, is they're the ones that are really the glue holding together your go-to-market organization. They connect the dots between sales and CS and marketing to make sure that you're providing that 360-degree view of the customer before, during, and after the sale. And then by recognizing how we're connected, the different functions, you really start to realize how important it is for all these teams to be aligned in order for the customer to receive a delightful and consistent and positive experience. And one of the things that we've noticed at HubSpot, and one of the many reasons why we formed RevOps, is based on customer feedback. We were hearing from our customers that they were feeling like we had this disjointed experience where we were, had these very visible handoffs throughout the customer experience where we're handing off customers from sales to C or marketing to sales to CS, and that's what we wanted to address.
Yeah, again, what we call friction, right? So that just
exactly
removing the friction wherever possible, whether it's with your people. Well, I guess going back to your three pillars you mentioned earlier on. Removing any friction from your people as part of your people strategy, removing any friction in how you collect and use data, and then, of course, removing friction from your systems, which is, we talk a lot about the silos that, typically exist between, marketing teams, sales teams, and their customer support folks, often living in different systems. And, how do you provide that aligned customer experience, never mind the employee experience, which of course, as we've been doing this now for the last couple of years, have also realized, especially right now, there's probably one of the biggest benefits of RevOps is, with talent being so tight and keeping people, happy at work, give them a fully integrated system, they're more likely to be happy and stick around. versus go and work with a, as we call Frankenstein system somewhere else.
Yes, exactly. And I think when you have those Frankenstein systems and you have a lot of the friction, it just puts more work and burden on your frontline teams, which leads to burnout and unhappiness. And so, it really is so important that you get that foundational level right, because when you're solving for, again, the reps, you're solving for the customer. And to the
Right.
point on alignment, which we talked a little bit about, I spend a lot of time on alignment. And one of our sayings at HubSpot is alignment eats strategy for breakfast. And so the first thing that we do is we focus on alignment. We don't jump into the strategy, because if we can't get aligned, we're not going to have a strategy. So it really starts with alignment. And, you mentioned this before, how do you get out of those silos of sales, marketing, and CS? And, how do you think holistically and get aligned around a single aligned strategy for your go-to-market teams, right? Is just so important. So we spend a lot of time on alignment before we do anything else at HubSpot.
Yeah, and which actually reminds me of a phrase we use around here a lot, which is, let's try and work smarter, not harder.
Yes.
So this is all part of it, right? So the thing doesn't have to be broken before you fix it, kind of deal, right?
Exactly.
So now that we've established why it's so important, how do you create the RevOps function?
Yeah, it's so funny. So, I wish there were a playbook out there, because we mentioned before, like, what does RevOps look like at HubSpot? How did you design it? And I think what was so hard as I, ramped up in this role is there's no playbook. If you were to go start a sales team, there's a playbook for what, sales strategy in a team looks like. Same thing with marketing and CS. There's really not a lot out there for RevOps, because it's very new and it's very cutting edge. So because I didn't have a playbook to rely on, I kind of took a step back and focused on, some first principles. And that's really what I used as guardrails to create this RevOps playbook within HubSpot. So the first is prioritizing customer in versus function out. We mentioned this before, like, I want all of my teams to be solving for the customer above all else. I think traditionally, again, ops folks are solving for the teams that they support, which is important, but you solve for the customer through them. So, always making sure the team is thinking for the customer first. And that's a lot of how, that's truly how I created this RevOps playbook. And we talked about those horizontal elements. That's why we've evolved from a solely vertical organization of marketing ops, sales ops, CS ops, to one that's more horizontal and that has those horizontal elements of data and systems and enablement and strategy. So I think it's important, to always be solving for the customer and figuring out how your organization can support that. And we've done that through some of these horizontal teams, balancing them with the vertical teams. The next principle is, how do we be big and fast? So I've been at HubSpot for over 10 years, and we used to be small and fast. And what was so great about being small, and it was easy to go fast, is because we were all crammed into like a single office space. I could turn to someone in sales or turn to someone in marketing and quickly solve a challenge. But as you grow, we're over 5,000 employees now. It's hard to get things done. You're not all crammed into the same room, especially in this day and age, right? So it's really important to find ways that you can still operate with speed and move quickly and not have so many dependencies, especially at HubSpot, because we value autonomy in order for us to move quickly. So what ends up happening, I think, as organizations grow is ops spends more time coordinating. And I hate to hear when people are coordinating the work versus doing the work. And so I'm taking, this idea of building to be big and fast to kind of heart in terms of how we solve things. So how do I remove those dependencies so I have teams actually doing the work and not just coordinating it?
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. People, coordinating things instead of getting things done.
And then the last piece is, how do you build for the long term and long-term scale? I've been in ops for a very long time, and I think traditionally ops teams are invested in when it's too late, when there's something wrong, when there's a fire to be put out, a mess to be cleaned up. And so ops teams are formed in a reactive state. And so that you're constantly trying to put out fires and move to the next thing. And what ends up happening is you put in a bunch of short-term fixes or band-aid solutions, and that only creates more debt in the future, more systems debt, more data debt, more tech debt. And I think I've really got to figure out a way to get the team to balance, solving for the long term looking at data like foresight and insight data that is really going to help us all for the long term, as opposed to just reacting to things and cleaning up those messes. So it's a tough balance, and I think an evolution that a lot of ops teams have to go through because of the way in which they were formed to clean something up or to put out a fire.
Yeah. So there's definitely a huge, well, not only philosophical but also mindset change that has to take place, from the top down and the bottom up. Is that something that you think about and talk about?
Yeah, I very much think that's true, because it doesn't happen overnight. And so you have to set a new culture, you have to set a new way of operating, you have to kind of slowly evolve from a reactive organization to a proactive one. And as you know, that doesn't happen overnight, because a lot of teams don't have endless resources to keep fixing the things that are broken right now, but also solving for the future. So it's a bit of an evolution, and one that it's important to get your stakeholder alignment on as well and bring them along for that journey.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. What's been interesting, Allison, just to sort of go back again a little, I mentioned at the beginning, so you're my first guest that actually has a RevOps title. And with my first guests and some of the people I'm going to be speaking to in the future, when I first reach out to them, and the reason I'm reaching out to them is because they've been very successful. They're running very successful businesses. Most of them have been CEOs and presidents or CMOs of very successful organizations. In many cases, who haven't even heard of RevOps and therefore definitely aren't using the RevOps model. But as we get chatting, they start to say, well, we actually do that, and we do that, and we do that. So I would say right now that they're probably doing 70 to 75% of what we're talking about. Although I cannot help feeling that, that's great, and they're on the right track. But I'm guessing there's going to be a huge kick in efficiency and customer experience, et cetera, if they do get that full alignment and take it up to 100%. And that's part of the seed, that I'm trying to plant here too. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that again, because there are a lot of people listening who are thinking about it. If you say to them, well, do you feel that you have, misalignment between sales and marketing, whether it's your processes, your data, your communication, whatever it is, and they go, oh yeah. So if you just, keep it simple, then people start to realize, oh yes, we do that, we don't do that, we fixed that, etc. So again, for those of you, watching and listening, RevOps is just a term that makes a lot of sense to people using it, but really what it is, it's all the things that Allison was talking about, which is, getting alignment for your people, your processes, your data, and your systems. So moving on. So what does RevOps look like at HubSpot today, Allison?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this, like, how we formed RevOps. You've had your foundational team. So we have kind of a team that's focused on, creating data assets and insights for the organization. We've got a team focused on systems. One of the things we're looking to do at HubSpot is run HubSpot on HubSpot. So, we have teams that are working to really get our whole organization on HubSpot, which is exciting, but a lot of work to be done. So that's very much aligned with our strategy. And then I still have the traditional sales ops, marketing ops, and CS ops teams that partner closely with our CMO, our head of sales, our head of CS, with that partnership, but are supported and are working off that singular foundation, which is within RevOps. And then finally, we have our strategy team. So we have a go-to-market strategy team that looks holistically at the end-to-end experience. Our partner strategy team, as you can imagine, we partner closely with our partners to sell and service our customers. That needs to be end-to-end. And then our enablement team is also serving our entire go-to-market team. So I have a leader who leads go-to-market enablement and is building out the strategy there. So that's at a high level, what RevOps at HubSpot looks like. We're still evolving into this new model. It's a pretty big change because at the start of this year, what we did is we just moved our vertical teams over. We moved over marketing ops, sales ops, and CS ops. And so over time, I've been trying to take a more horizontal view of those elements to be more horizontal.
Yeah, as you prefaced right at the beginning, there's obviously still work to do. You're a year into it. It sounds like you're very, very confident and optimistic about this model going forward.
Yes, absolutely. Already we're starting to see efficiencies. Already just the collaboration between the teams has been phenomenal. I think one of the byproducts of this is not just solving for the customer or your reps, it's solving for the ops teams. I think, we talked about coordination work and actually doing the work. And I think one of the biggest pieces of feedback I've gotten is from my direct team. It's like, wow, it's so easy to collaborate now. I feel like we are identifying redundancies that I'm doing in marketing versus sales. And, instead of us both doing them, we're going to have one person do it and it's going to free up time. So it's actually helping us to give a little bit more space and breathing room to ops too, because we're identifying where there's redundancies and getting more leverage out of the team too. So it's been a win for the ops teams as well.
That's awesome. And then something else that you mentioned, which I wanted to talk about, that we've actually been, I would say, talking about and using as a HubSpot solutions partner ourselves just in the last sort of 8 or 9 months. We're one of the, I guess, I don't know how many partners, but it seems like a minority of partners who've sort of gone upstream, as HubSpot has created this upstream solution. And one of the questions we get when we're chatting with larger companies who are looking at doing some sort of digital transformation and implementing HubSpot as part of their solution, or at least considering HubSpot as one of the platforms, is, well, are there any billion-dollar companies that use HubSpot? And we say, well, yeah, HubSpot is a billion-dollar company and they use HubSpot. Of course, there are others too, but that typically suffices because HubSpot has had incredible success so far. And I think this is just one of the ways more recently that HubSpot is going to continue to grow very effectively.
Exactly, and we've been growing at such an amazing clip. It's been super exciting, but what's so great is that we are kind of the upmarket buyer that our product team is building for. And so I feel like we are doing really innovative things on the go-to-market side. We inspire the product team on features and functionality to build. So it's a really great kind of flywheel that we have going on internally at HubSpot that I think is a win-win for us and our customers.
Great. Sort of coming back to a data component for HubSpot specifically. So how do you measure success on your RevOps teams?
Yeah, great question. So I think, when you think about RevOps, what they're trying to do is accelerate growth, and usually that's in the form of revenue. So to drive revenue growth. However, you want to do that efficiently. And so one of the things that I'm focusing my team on is how do we break this idea of breaking linear growth? Because today, typically how we grow is we add more sales reps, we add more CS reps, and then revenue grows. We need to find a way, because we're not going to be able to hire all these people, if I look out 5 or 10 years, to break linear growth, break apart headcount growth and revenue. And I think that is the metric. And so the one I think about that's top of mind is revenue per go-to-market employee. So are you able to break linear growth while also accelerating growth? And so that's the measure that I'm excited about. And so it's really investing in the tools to help us scale as we continue to grow revenue over the next 3 to 5 years.
Interesting. Sort of start to wrap up here, Allison. Are there any resources that you'd recommend for the folks watching and listening that they should take a look at?
Yeah, we have a lot internally at HubSpot that I would recommend. So I'd recommend and encourage everyone to check out HubSpot Academy. So it's an online database of free online courses and resources in inbound marketing, sales, customer service. And we have some cool and exciting RevOps specific lessons that are super valuable, and also some other certifications and learning opportunities that I find useful for all different types of operators. So definitely go check it out, academy.hubspot.com, and definitely want to put a plug in for that because I think the content there is just phenomenal. The team's done a great job.
Agreed, yeah, and I guess that's one of the resources that, again, we realize how HubSpot has done such an incredible job with the Academy, and I think has really become another one of the many differentiators for HubSpot is that the training that goes with the product so that people can actually use it. The reason that they invested in the first place actually works because people are being trained and have better insights into using a product, which of course is already very easy to use. So that's definitely a good recommendation. And then for the leaders and professionals, leading and, as we say, championing RevOps and growth in their organizations, what is your one wish or that they would, as they prepare for a wildly successful 2022 and beyond?
Yeah, I think, the first thing I would do is listen to your team. They know what's working, what's not working. They see the friction firsthand. And so, your RevOps model that you create or processes or systems is really dependent on where your company is and where there's friction in the process. And I think listening to both your customers and your ops teams will give you a really clear sense of that. And you'll know, like, okay, well, do I have a data issue? Do I have a systems issue? Do I have a process issue? And that will help dictate where you should focus as you think about, your own RevOps priorities or journey.
Well, of course, I really love that, and I wish that it was actually a softball from me, but it wasn't, because I think you might know that we recently launched RevOpsScore.com, which is, in fact, is a way for people to do exactly that, so they can do a 10-minute online assessment to see where the gaps or friction is, in their, whether it's their marketing, their sales, their customer service, if it's more of a technology thing, a process thing, a people thing. So thanks for setting that one up. For anyone listening, whether you know about RevOps or not, if you want to just assess where your business is at today, go and do the RevOps score. It'll take you 10 minutes, and it'll really help you very quickly and within 10 minutes, figure out where you start that fix so that you can provide a better customer experience and a better employee experience, of course. That goes together with better revenue and better profit typically. Allison, and then, so thanks again so much for being here today. If folks want to connect with you, what is the best way to do so?
Yeah, just LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so it's Alison Elworthy, and feel free to connect with me. And Brendon, thanks so much for the time today. This was great. I love the revenue score too. I think one of the most challenging things is with RevOps, gosh, there can be a lot and it can be overwhelming. And I think the hardest part is just figuring out where you want to focus. And so I love that the revenue score can help figure that out. I mean, I wish I had that in my early days because, it can be overwhelming for sure. So
yeah, thanks so much. And as you said, there is currently no playbook for RevOps. So, we will be improving that tool as we collect, more data and see where it's more helpful for folks as that playbook becomes more visible. I'm sure there'll be more than one version of it. Thank you, Allison. Did you have any other parting comments before we hang up here?
No, I think the last thing, we didn't talk too much about it, but just is focusing on your team. I truly believe that, when ops is embedded in functional teams, they're kind of the last ones to be thought of, the last to be invested in. And it's hard to both, hire and retain great ops talent. And so as a collective RevOps team, you have the opportunity to invest in those individuals, invest in skill development, competencies, building out career paths for them. And I think it's so important not to overlook the people. We talked a lot about systems and processes, but people are just so critical. And when you're in a RevOps, organization or mindset, there's a huge opportunity to really do that and invest in the people, which is, quite frankly, the most important piece of it.
Yeah, I'm really pleased you mentioned that because, of course, everybody's either just wrapping up or have wrapped up or about to wrap up their annual planning. And of course, including us. And one of the things that's always very apparent when you start focusing on the most important things, at the end of the day, there are only two important things, and that is getting great people and then getting great customers. Whether you learned that in the Peter Drucker days or you've just figured out the hard way, that remains very true. So thanks for mentioning it. I think that's a great way to end. And thank you again, Allison. And I look forward to chatting again soon.
Thanks, Brendon. This was great. Talk soon.
Take care.
Thank you for checking out this episode of RevOps Champions. This show is powered by Dynamico, a HubSpot consulting firm, helping businesses level up the technology systems that power their ability to scale. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow RevOps Champions wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Or visit RevOpsChampions.com to get immediate access to all of the latest episodes.